In all of Oz, no wizard that there is or was.
Are we dressing up?
We can if you want to. I have been changed.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth from Disability Rights UK, and today we're with Chantelle Nassari, the Accessibility Co-ordinator for both of the Wicked films, but she also does many more things than that. Today we are going to talk about the importance of representation, access to the arts as disabled people, and particularly as young disabled people, understanding what opportunities are out there for us and recognizing that there is space for us in this place where actually maybe sometimes we're made to think that there's not. So we're going to have fun today. Are you ready to play a game?
I am so ready.
Okay. Obviously, you worked on one of the biggest films last year, one of now probably the most famous musicals in recent times. I assume you know a lot about musicals.
Well, I hope so. We're about to find out.
We are going to take it in turns to see how many musicals we can describe in a minute. Lots of children who are revolting. They, as in like they're not
disgusting children.
No, they're going against their dictator in a school. We are revolting children living in
Matilda.
Yes. Oh, she has 3 dads. She doesn't know which is her dad.
Oh,
it's ABBA.
ABBA. It's what's it called? Mamma Mia.
Yes. Okay, there's loads of animals. The costumes are great. It's been on the West End for absolutely years. Elton John wrote the songs.
Lion King.
Yes. You were the access coordinator.
On Wicked.
Yes. Oh, this is upside down. She's Ginger. She's an orphan.
Annie.
Yes.
I want more singing from you.
Well, I mean, now I need to try and think. I'm not throwing away my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot.
Oh my God.
With Lin-Manuel Miranda, Eliza, it's about America. It's about, becoming independent from the British. Jonathan Groff is a great king.
Time's up.
Hamilton.
Oh.
You're 4 in a minute. That's the one.
I felt like it was a lot more
to
than
beat. I think we were on a roll. Okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Ready?
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. French. 2 words. It's been running for many, many years. Revolution.
Oh, cabaret. That's not
No.
2 words. Oh, Moulin Rouge.
No.
That's also not French.
And
oh, Les Mis.
oh, thank
Literally
you.
Les Mis.
My
Sorry.
gosh, thank you so much, because I was trying to think of the song and it wasn't there. Okay, so this was a movie. It turned into a musical.
Yeah.
And
Legally Blonde.
Legally Blonde. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to do that one.
Pass it. That's fine.
Okay. I don't even know what that one is. Oh, okay. So, the musical, they were all playing school children, yet they were all like 35 to 40 years old. And the most legendary songs ever, and a car flies at the end.
Oh, did you do
you're
Bang?
the one that I won. You are the one.
Oh, Grease.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Okay, hang on. Oh,
how many was that?
3.
You don't know what she's been through this morning. She got stuck in a lift.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had our game. Let's now get down to a real conversation.
Okay.
Not that wasn't really important conversation. I think it was.
It's very important.
I think we could just talk for the next hour about the difference between Madonna and Rachel Zegler's portrayal of Evita. But we're going to talk about some more serious things. So first off, tell us what you actually do. So I know that obviously you're an accessibility coordinator, but you also do other things. Like, give us some background on what you're doing.
Well, I've done lots of things. I trained as a dancer. I was a contemporary dancer for most of the start of my life. I moved into fostering. I fostered teenagers specifically, and that led me into teaching. And I was a teacher of dance, music. And then being Greek, having olive oil run in my veins as opposed to blood, I ended up being a chef. So I trained as a chef, so I was involved in catering and as a chef. So those were the early years. When I moved, I had a child, and then I moved into kind of advocacy, really, for young people, and that kind of led into advocacy for young disabled people. I trained level 3 sign language, BSL interpreter, quite interpreter at level 3, but so I've covered lots of things, and then becoming the accessibility coordinator on the Wicked movies, I kind of led me into wanting to make change more. So now I am chair on the Access Forum locally to me. I teach cooking to make cooking accessible for adults with disabilities, specifically adults with learning disabilities. I am a presenter on my local radio station, Hertfordshire's Mix 92.6. I kind of get involved in everything. I think I've always felt that I was allowed to take up space, and I think that's quite unusual for disabled people, but my mother is also a wheelchair user, so I kind of always had that entitlement, I think, to take up space, so I kind of bulldoze my way into spaces.
Love that.
I think
As you should.
As I should, as I always have. And there's skirting board chip to prove it. But I love now that the point of my life that I've reached, that I can do that for other people.
Absolutely. And that actually you didn't just need, you're in a place now, you know, you don't just need the confidence that you're allowed in that space, but that you have, I hate to say proven because we shouldn't have to prove anything, but you know, you've gained that confidence and you've demonstrated to everyone how we should all be allowed in that space. And that's really grown to go, I'm bringing everyone, bringing everyone into the space, because actually it wasn't that I needed the confidence to overcome the odds when I was younger. It was that those were systemic barriers, like injustice that I faced. It shouldn't have been hard. Let me make it, you know, more inclusive for everyone following me.
Absolutely. I think the role of accessibility coordinator was something that I willed to be a real position without knowing. It was a job that I always I had to do for free for myself all the way through in theatres. Performing on stages with raked stage in a manual wheelchair is quite a thing. So I think I didn't want anybody else to feel like, exactly as you said, that they didn't have the right to be there, but also that taking up the energy to coordinate my own accessibility kind of put me at a disadvantage to everybody else I was working with. More often than not, I was the only disabled person in my settings. And so I was at a disadvantage because, say, 20% of my energy had been taken by a raked stage or inaccessible stages, you know, getting to dressing rooms, whatever. Therefore, I was performing at 80% and everybody else was coming in at 100. And I think that's what makes it so important to have people to advocate and set up that space. Yeah,
absolutely. That not only are you at, you know, the disadvantage because, you know, everyone's making you feel like it's not a place for you and you have to be really sure of yourself and really confident. And that takes a lot more than kind of being given it, right? Or just being there already and it being a given that you're kind of meant to be there. But then also, you know, which we'll come on to, but the importance of roles like accessibility coordinators, right? That as you say, you had to do that yourself, that it was then an additional barrier and burden to go, I believe that I'm meant to be in this space and you are all wrong, but also I'm having to physically make this space for me because no one is there to do what they should be doing.
Yes, and it impacts the attitude as well. So, you know, I would experience that people would want me to be in the space, and they'd say, you know, yes, this would be amazing. Do this, do this, and then I get there and they go, oh, well, it's not our fault. We really want you to, but you can't because of this obstacle. So then I would have to fight the obstacle. I would have to it became an excuse to not have inclusion sometimes. But, you know, I was also, being a dancer, I was quite used to being lifted physically. So there was never an obstacle for me. But there's no way anyone's lifted me now. So, and things are changing. I think there's a lot more people aware, and a lot more changes, and a lot more legislations in place to make sure that that's not the case. But something I've always kind of advocated for is that you can make a theatre accessible for a viewer, but you need to make the theatre accessible for a performer too, because the front of house can be made accessible, and it kind of is a standard now. But think beyond that, think that actually the people coming on your stage may also have access needs. And
so thinking about your journey, you know, thinking about 15-year-old Chantelle, who is about to be, I found this on Google, I don't know if you had it fully fact-checked, but the first person in this country who was a wheelchair user who did a dance GCSE, right? Like that's where you are. Right? Just talk a bit more about sort of your journey from 15-year-old you to where you are.
I think I have inherited through generations of stubborn, obnoxious Greeks. I think I have a rebellious streak in me that if somebody tells me I can't do something, then I want to do it more. But I also come from a very creative family. And at my school, my mum was called in often and told that she should be steering me in more administrative roles and inspiring me to kind of work more in office-based jobs. And she refused to do that. And you know, performance, I was very dramatic. I don't know what you're talking about. But I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to be, so I guess that kind of, this is where my skills lay. This is what I'm good at, and I shouldn't have to do something I don't want to do. That kind of, that factored greatly in that. And, you know, creativity is a thing. You can't deny it, you can't ignore it, even as simply as problem solving something. If I couldn't open the curtain, I would suddenly be, just like in my mind's eye, I would be creating a way of doing it with a pulley system, and I would like be checking out the frame of the window, and I was interested in textiles. I was interested in any kind of creative area. So I think that kind of fueled it all.
So we've got an idea of your journey, what's led you to where you are. You then, again, I found this on Google, you can fact check me, you were apparently headhunted by Universal.
Not really headhunted.
Okay, the BBC over-egged the pudding on that.
They totally did, yeah. I wasn't headhunted, no. But I did have a friend who was working in production, and she told me that they were going to be hiring an accessibility coordinator. So I applied for the job. So I knew about the position, and I went for the interview. And in the interview, I kind of went in there having not been an accessibility coordinator before, but knowing what I always needed in my life. So that was the angle I came in on. But the conversation during the interview, they were talking about the ethos behind production, and it wasn't about just making the space behind the camera accessible. What was important was that as a viewer watching, that it would look plausible, and plausibility was huge for me, because when I'm watching something, if I see somebody in an electric wheelchair transfer into a vehicle that isn't able to carry, is not a WAV, then you see them arriving and their wheelchair's just there, you know, you've lost my interest. I'm not interested, because I know that that's not realistic. And so the plausibility element's gone. And they were talking about plausibility for viewers, and I thought they've really thought about this. Actually, the vision was there. And I think with John M. Chu's vision and inclusion, with, you know, with the casting and with everything, I think there was a waterfall effect. And so all the elements of production and all the departments were kind of really engaged in that.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, you know, we talk about the importance of representation and inclusion because it is just the thing that needs to be done right. It's the right thing. It is the equitable thing. We're currently on the back foot, but also as well that so much of this is that, as always, you know, when we talk about nothing about us without us and being led by lived experience, your lived experience enhances your expertise and ability to do the role of an access coordinator, because you don't just go, oh, on the set, how do we do this thing? You go, well, that doesn't look plausible to me. I know what that plausibility looks like because I live it every day as well. And do you think that, you know, gave you an advantage, I guess, when applying for that role?
100%. I think it's important to say that accessibility coordinators have to have a lived experience. So in order, there is training that you can do, but in order to be one, you have to have a lived experience of disability, deaf or neurodivergence, and that does inform the work you do. No one knows us better than us. So how, you know, you can learn and you can study, but until you've lived the experience, you can't truly understand. Yeah,
absolutely. So tell us about working on Wicked. Like, what, in terms of the accessibility that you coordinated, what did that coordination look like day to day?
So in the beginning, I came in and I met with every department. So, you know, they were laying out blueprints. The set design team were there laying out blueprints and blowing my mind with this concept of an ocean and stuff, and you know, designing boats. And so I was involved in everything from the very start. Before they'd even finished casting, I was already on board, which I thought was brilliant. So I met with hair and makeup. The very first thing I did, actually, I should say, was meet with the people that had the trailers. So adapting the trailer was my very first job on that. And we designed, well, I mean, when you're working on a movie with a budget of Wicked, there is no obstacle. So everything I suggested, they did. And, you know, you have a trailer that has every adaptation. You've got raising and lowering surfaces, you've got voice control, you've got the hoists, you've got the touch, it's all there. And so making the space accessible, and not just for Marissa, but with an idea going forward that trailer can be used forever for everybody. So, you know, although I was there specifically originally brought in for Marissa, who is a wheelchair user, and for the younger Marissa, younger Nessa Rose, which is Cecily, also a wheelchair user, authentically cast, both of them. That was my, that was the reason I was brought in. However, it was much bigger. The picture was much broader than that.
And clearly, as you say, so long term, right? This wasn't a tick box exercise of, we've decided to prioritize it for this project, but we're not really making big waves outside of that. But actually going, as you say, we're making this trailer because then this trailer can be used till the end of time, because we want to be casting more disabled actors. But also as well, in terms of you being brought in pre-casting, that it wasn't that, you know, Marissa came and wowed everyone and they went, oh, maybe we should have a disabled actor. That was a very clear, you know, commitment from the start. Not only that they wanted, you know, authentic and meaningful representation, but also that they needed to do that properly from, as you say, internally, externally, at every stage. They were very clear on what they were doing. The vision was in place, the ethos was there, and that filtered through. So it was clearly, it was a very deliberate, conscious and well delivered effort and commitment. You know, really a well-oiled machine on not just we're going to be accessible for this project, but we have a vision for how our accessibility is going to contribute to future projects and everything going forward.
It was a platform, and I think it's done amazing things for the world of, inclusion for disabled people within the arts. I think it was really innovative, and it really needed to happen. It was long overdue, but it's happened, and this is great. I think something that I became acutely aware of once I'd started working was that even though I'd been brought in specifically for the actors, the broader picture was that, there were people in other departments that had access needs that maybe hadn't disclosed because, as disabled people, we don't always want to make waves because then we carry this kind of conditioning that we're harder to employ, blah, blah, blah.
Especially in such a competitive, fast-paced industry. And,
absolutely. It hinders our chances of employment, etc., blah, blah. We don't want that. But that is something that we grow up with, don't make a fuss. So to have an access coordinator on set, I think people started reaching out to me from other departments, and somebody from perhaps props who needed a quiet space nearby, and they would be then able to perform at the top of their game with just a small adjustment to be made. So the picture is a lot bigger than just the people on the camera, because the people behind the camera is what makes everything happen. And so we're not just aspiring to be performers, we're aspiring to be in every industry, in every area of every industry. And what we want is people behind the cameras. We want people in the creative departments with disabilities. We want disabled leadership. And an access coordinator can take away that responsibility. It's not a free job that we have to do ourselves. It doesn't have to be. Somebody can do it for you and make that space accessible for you to step in.
Absolutely. And I think what's so great about that example as well is that it demonstrates how collective this commitment needs to be, right? As you say, it's not a volunteering job, it's a role that's really important, but also thinking about 16-year-old Chantelle who had to do that job for, herself, that actually, when we're looking at inclusion and, tackling inequality and removing barriers, it is never about individuals, right? It should always be systemic, it should always be collective. And this is no different, that actually you could have come in, if Universal had the kind of narrow-minded view that if you had an access coordinator, it must only be for this individual actor who is a wheelchair user, which for those who don't know, Marissa Bodie plays Nessa Rose, who is a wheelchair user in the original stage show and obviously the film as well. She is the sister of Elphaba, which if you don't know anything about Wicked, you probably know there's someone who's green. She's the sister of the one who's green. That's who we're talking about.
But I just say, if you haven't seen Wicked, don't be sorry, be better.
So true, be better. Go and watch Wicked. I never expected, as someone who works at a DPO, who most of the time campaigns for things that have nothing to do with fun art stuff, that I'd just be, doing an advert for Universal. That's what my job's become. I'm gonna take a career shift, clearly. It could have been so easy, and not just easy, it's what happens, right? A lot of the time across the board, it's rare to see the kind of commitment and the commitment to inclusion that we had, right, in this project. It would have been expected that they would have gone, we have one disabled actor that we know of that we're sure will need support from you. You're just going to be with her. That is your job. There is nothing else to do there. But actually, you would have missed all of these other people who are not having an accessible time right now, who will be being put at a disadvantage, which sure, that makes their experience harder. That impacts how, their sustainability in the sector and all of those different things. But also, not to bring in what is my job. I work in policy. It's illegal. It's really illegal. And we should be making sure that work is accessible for everyone. And I think that, that's so highlighted that it should, whether you are an employer, whether you are running a small community group, it should have never been what you experienced because that was just that no one was doing anything. But also, it should never be through an individual outlook because accessibility is collective. And when we're looking at the social model, we face collective barriers, right? Like that is what excludes us from society. And so I think, that's so key that this wasn't just that, you helped an individual, because otherwise deficit model kind of why she wouldn't have been able to do her job, but that actually you made that set a collectively much better, more inclusive place for literally everyone that was there.
Yeah, we are in every aspect of every industry, but we mask a lot. And so we burn out quite quickly, we struggle. And I think that things have changed thanks to roles like yours. I think things are.
I try.
And that's how important it is. And I think young people need to know that they have the right to be in every space, every space. There should be no exclusion.
Reflecting on your experience of Wicked.
Yeah.
What was it like to be in the same room as Jonathan Bailey?
Bizarre.
And not just Jonathan Bailey, many amazing actors, and
it was surreal for me. So I didn't go into it really expecting or understanding. I didn't even address the reality and the enormity of what I was about to do. And, Michelle Yeoh is like one of my all-time heroes. And she walked past me on set and she went, "Hi," and I went, because I just couldn't find words. It was incredible just to be around this level of brilliance, and it was overwhelming and humbling, and one of those things you'll never forget.
Yeah, and not to keep throwing it back to your younger self, but we're thinking a lot about young disabled people and how they find roots into these places. What would be your advice for your younger self when you were on that set around such brilliance and some of the most famous people that, because you couldn't avoid the Wicked press or as you were seeing their faces everywhere. Yeah. What were you saying to 15-year-old Chantelle?
Be cool, be cool. Don't try and be funny.
You'll get here, and then when you get there, one day you're going to meet Michelle.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need to be ready.
Yeah, find words, don't just snort. Use your words.
So thinking a bit about the barriers to access. So obviously, clearly Wicked, there didn't seem to be many at all. So I was going to ask, despite the commitment, did you face some? But it seems like there weren't many.
There are, I think, just communication that needs to filter down. I would come in prior to a scene being filmed and I would set it all up. And then I would come during the filming and, things had been moved. So it was just about maintaining that communication, I think, and delegating that, who passes the information down, etc. But they were on board with the intention. Absolutely.
You didn't face any kind of hesitancy around, well, maybe we can't do that. Or, of course, as we've said, it's universal. There was never, well, that's too much money. Do you know what I mean? There was, which, of course...
Time was more of an issue than money.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
And we're obviously... This is not a realistic representation of most people's experiences. Yeah. This isn't, the community group in the local church. Yeah. They probably have less money. But you didn't necessarily face that hesitancy. No. But maybe more logistically, it was just making sure that, how you can be consistent in a major film set, right? And how you can make sure that all of those things are in place.
Yeah, and imposter syndrome is real, and I think more so for growing up with a disability. Do I deserve to be here? That kind of thing. And I think it's just the right to speak out. That was my job. That was why I was there. Yeah. Speak out, make waves. If it's not right, say it's not right. Yeah. And so I understood.
Yeah. And let's talk about imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Because I think that the representation point in this is really interesting. There's so much we can say about representation. And there is the obvious, opportunities point that actually the conversation around whether non-disabled actors should play disabled roles means that they are taking opportunities away from disabled actors who probably are more likely to be refused from other roles, that there's no creativity around what that character couldn't be disabled, right? There's less disabled characters in stories to play.
Yes.
So you're taking away those opportunities, but also as well, it's about the story that you tell and actually what that representation is, which I think, you know, on the impact this project had on the opportunities point, we know that Marissa Bodie was, of course, the first Nessa Rose in the 20 years that had been on the stage to be a disabled actor who played a disabled character. And now we have Jenna Bainbridge, who is a disabled Nessa Rose on Broadway as well. You know, that actually your role most keenly, right, has demonstrated how you can make those things accessible and how that's possible, but also on the kind of story point. And actually it's not just about having a disabled person, it's kind of the story you tell with that disabled person. There are a few kind of notes that I jotted down of what I thought really spoke to me as, you know, a disabled woman watching Wicked, that we can do complex representation of disabled people. And that, of course, there are the classic, which was, I went into part 2 of Wicked and was waiting to see what they did with the infamous "we've cured her," right? And I didn't think, given how great they've been with everything else, that they were curing her. But I was intrigued what they were doing. And the approach they took was brilliant, right? That actually it wasn't, the plot wasn't that the issue was Nessa Rose is disabled and therefore she must not be disabled. The plot was, spoilers if you've not seen Wicked, she, you know, has gone down a bit of a dark path. She's not happy anymore. She's maybe being a bit manipulative and flawed as a character. And she wants to be happy again. And her sister can give her that happiness in that moment, which sure, she's flying, but aside from Alfred, no one can fly in this film. Like even Glinda can't fly, you know, she's not got the magical powers. It's not that actually, oh, but if you walked, maybe you'd be happy. It's, well, let me make you fly. Let me give you this amazing experience. And also that she is flawed, that actually, you know, she is, it's not just, we need to be palatable, disabled characters, but we can also be flawed.
Yeah, because we, you know, on screen, well, disabled people make up 25% of the population. And so if you only see 1 to 2% of that represented on screen, that's not a real representation of society. So, and we are real people, you know, you won't just have somebody who is either disabled or black or you know, we're everything. We're all of every group, and so that needs to be also taken in consideration and represented. And lived experience is everything. You can't truly perform a character that you have no lived experience of, no matter how much you can research it. You know, people submerge themselves in characters in order to understand and portray them beautifully on stage. But, you know, short of kind of tokenistic, I'm not going to walk for a week, you know, that's not the same thing as being disabled, physically disabled. So, you know, I think it is really important that they, you know, that waterfall effect of the ideas, the innovation behind it did just filter right through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, that it should inform the story. And that's why lived experience is so important from that actor as well. That it's not just, you know, oh, for the plot, this character's disabled, we'll stick them in a wheelchair, right? Like it's, who is this character, right? Like how actually...
because it informs you.
Of course.
It informs, you know, being in a wheelchair isn't who I am, but it totally informs my life experience and my background and the person I've become is, you know, it has been informed by that. And but I also think it's really important to say that I think incidental casting is really important too, because I don't think that characters with disabilities should be about their disability. I think that if there were more characters in television and film that just happen to be disabled and you don't even need to address it.
Yeah.
They just are. Yeah. That is more of an authentic representation of society.
Yeah.
And that, yes, when there is a role specifically that is the role is of a disabled person, then absolutely 100% always cast a disabled person, but characters don't need to be defined by the disability.
Absolutely. And on your point earlier about intersectionality, right, that actually we are everything too, that often representation, as you said, access can be seen as a tick box, can be seen as a favor, right, rather than recognizing that it massively serves the story and the art that you're trying to do. And something else that I really thought was, obviously we have Nessa Rose, we have Elphaba. Elphaba is green, sure, but
you're green.
I know. She is green. Obviously, not that I'm aware we have green people in our life today, but the fact that she is green and the way she's treated is a huge metaphor for racism. And the fact that Cynthia Erivo is black and she had braids and that was represented and that was kind of not hidden away from. Some might say, well, she's green. Like, you're not telling that story because she's literally green. Why have you painted her green? But actually, the intersectional understanding of that and those kinds of representation, even when, as you say, we don't need to spoon feed it, we don't need to point it out, but we all know what they're saying, massively deepens and serves the story.
Yeah, and also, watching it, young people growing up aspire. We have our role models on our screens, and if you're not represented, you don't have that kind of sense of your space. It comes from a very young age, doesn't it? The belonging, the sense of belonging, and when you see yourself in something you identify with, something it might not be the obvious thing you identify with, but we all identify with characters we see on screen, and it's hugely important to feel that we have a space in the world.
Absolutely. And I think as well that in terms of thinking about the progress we need to make societally, sure, in making the arts more accessible, all of these different things, but also in normalized biases and assumptions on disabled people. When we talk about having to be a palatable character, and that's the only representation that's allowed, some of the online response that Nessa Rose got really highlights some of those biases, right? That actually Glinda is also a flawed character, right? She did not, obviously she's not disabled, so she couldn't have experienced ableism, but she did not experience the same level of hatred, right? Of bias, weaponizing, I think, her identity to be angry at the character, right? And that is what happened.
Yes.
Not across the board. I think Nessa Rose was very well received. But there was some really awful responses. And I think that obviously that shouldn't have happened. And that's awful that Marissa Bodie had to experience that. But also it's such a reflection on not only studios maybe just want to do palatable characters, but that's not just because that's what happens, that's easier. That's because it reflects a real ugly bias in society that disabled people are, kind of inspiration porn, Olympians who have overcome all the odds, or they're lazy benefit scroungers. Do you know what I mean? And we kind of aren't allowed, fictional stories aside, in life as disabled people, we can relate to not being allowed to exist either side, or in between those two ideas.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all of that. I think in my life I've been inspiration porn for a lot of people, and it's quite a bizarre space to be in when you're experiencing that. And I used to deliberately rebel against it. So if somebody would say, you're so brave, and I would deliberately contrast that by pointing out how terrified of spiders I am, and actually that you don't know me. I'm not brave. I'm just me. This is the cards I've been dealt, and these are the cards I'm playing. And I think you're spot on.
Which, I mean, I won't go down it because we could have an additional hour conversation about disabled people being called brave.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, there's there's a meme that I often see that is something like, "You're so brave, thanks. It was either this or die." You know what I mean? So there is an element of that. Like that's not a helpful thing to say. I wasn't given a choice but to be brave. But also sometimes, which is my personal view, sometimes I think that brave and what we understand as bravery is almost just like a way for not necessarily just all non-disabled people, but someone who doesn't understand your experience to deflect from the discomfort that they feel from your experience.
Yes, it's about them. It's not about you.
That I don't want to sit in the fact that you've had to experience that. I need to be able to put that in a box somewhere and go, well, aren't you so brave? Rather than go, yeah, no, that was really a really hard time. That shouldn't have had to have happened. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And I was never part of, I never wanted to collude in that, making other people feel comfortable. And I can see why we do, but I never wanted to do that. So I would deliberately make somebody more uncomfortable on purpose, just to watch them squirm.
I think that's an excellent approach. So we've recognized how important this representation is, right? And not just because it's a tick box or the right thing to do, but it serves the story just artistically, but also it paves the way for actually changing how we can do this and how it can be more accessible. How do we make it more accessible? Accessibility UK have published a Make It Together toolkit. You can find the links in description. Some information might come up here. And it is all about how, not universal with the big bucks, but how community groups can think about accessibility, how they can be aware of actually what to cover, that, you know, you might not have the funding for an accessibility coordinator, but you, as the people running that group, can have an awareness and take responsibility of what needs to happen on those things. So go and check out the Make It Together toolkit. But on the Make It Together toolkit, what really jumped out for you on, if this, you know, again, 16-year-old Chantelle, right? If you went to a local dance group or whatever it might have been, and you were there on the raked stage, you know, having to think about all of these things and be your own access coordinator, if your local group or wherever it was that you were had done some of the things in that toolkit, what really jumped out to you as what would have been the most helpful thing, right? What would have made the difference?
I think for the environments I was working in to have been educated already in things, simple things like this, the social model of disability, and just not having to educate everybody along the way in the whole inspiration porn that we've covered. But also I think community is hugely important in the buddy system that you talk about. I think, you know, that would have really benefited me. Something I became acutely aware of during this experience and meeting Marissa was that I had a huge lack of community in my life, disabled community. It wasn't something that I'd ever tapped into because my mum was disabled, and that was, you know, every area of my life I tried to challenge. I was always the only disabled person. And so I think that that was a huge shift for me in my life, and I know how important community is now, because sharing experience with people with lived experience has really kind of healed my inner child. I think there's a lot of things in there that something that really mattered to me, and it would seem like something I wouldn't have spoken out about because I wouldn't have wanted to make a fuss, but simple things like bad weather. Like I physically am not able to perform at the same level I could in the summer as I could in the winter, for example. So cold weather really affects me, and to be something that people could be made aware of, and that would then impact how I approach that day's work. If it's raining, I'm in the wheelchair, my whole body's saturated, you know, I can't be outside during that. It then impacts my bones, it then impacts my physical energy, impacts everything. That kind of stuff, that really would have made a huge difference to me.
And I think also the point in the toolkit on, I can't remember how it's worded, but something along the lines of like, people's capacity might vary.
That's exactly.
And I think that the arts is such a specific place for that, because there is very much you've committed to do this show. There are expectations that might actually be really quite like intense and require consistently high capacity. And if you don't show up for that, you must not be committed to this show, right? I think that the arts is a really specific context where that is very embedded. So not only, as you say, having that awareness of how to make things accessible, but also in your approach to how you do the arts, maybe you don't, plan a show with a tight deadline, recognizing there are limitations to logistics, but you embed into that the fact that maybe there might be some weeks where people need to be off, or people, do you know what I mean? And I think that, again, on your point on community, which I relate to so much, I, went through up till my early 20s, being often the only disabled person in spaces, and then finding the DPO movement and being like, whoa, like, this is amazing. And, learning from each other and all of those things, and also not feeling the burden or responsibility of the inspiration porn, right? Of needing to prove you can overachieve, overcome the barriers. To truly do these things accessibly, you also need to carve out space and maybe rethink your approach to just doing the work. As you say, it's not just putting a ramp on it.
No.
It's maybe going, we always saw our shows in 6 months. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe actually we really need to reassess how we do those shows and how we make the time for, people having, feeling differently on different days, and the weather changing, and, all of those different things.
Yeah, and those things can impact the next week as well, because if you push through something that isn't healthy for you physically or mentally, then that will impact how you then perform following that. So these things are crucially important, and it's about educating the team, the creative team around it. It's not about you forcing yourself to go through it because you should. It's your disability is not something you've chosen.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's why that bit really stood out for me.
Yeah. And also the fact, again, on our collective point, thinking proactively, other people doing that thinking, that you don't have to go, oh no, I can't do this week because I've been pushed too hard, but actually it's already made in ideally a more flexible, inclusive way. And that actually it's also not you worrying that my choice to go to a local theatre group, which is maybe scary, and maybe I could have a buddy and that could be helpful. But a big part of it is, am I ready to commit to all of these things that I actually don't know until I'm halfway in it, whether I have the capacity to do it. And instead going, this is somewhere that's going to take, there was the phrase in the toolkit, come as you are, right? That you can come as you are, and they will adapt to you because you make a valuable contribution to that, and you are part of the arts, and they are making space for you. So on making space in the arts, young disabled people watching this, they're thinking, okay, it's my place to be in the arts. Maybe I didn't think that, but maybe I'm thinking it now. What do you do? Where do you go? What skills do you need? If you wanted a job in this, but also not just employment, right? If you just want to be more involved, like, where do you go for that? What are you doing?
I think don't wait for the space to be accessible. Build the room to make the space accessible for what you need. I think there are so many more opportunities that people need to know about. Like the National Film and Television School now has had a huge amount of money awarded to build accessible rooms so you can train and study. I think they've got 9 accessible rooms, so that this is in Beaconsfield, so that you can go and you can train in any area of being in film and television. You don't have to be in front of the camera, like I said before. Be the creative brains behind it. They are look for seek out organisations like CCC, Creative Diversity Network, the Disability Artists Networking Community, DANC. You know, they have loads of resources in there. You know, if you're a young person looking to work in this industry, research it. There are so many things that you can do, and the training is the first step.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, jobs that you might not know exist. And as you say, all those things behind the camera that are kind of our unsung heroes, and on opportunities as well. Today, we are in the Lyric Hammersmith. It's a lovely theatre. Thank you to the Lyric for having us. Action on Disability is one of their partners. And I believe this has finished now, but they had a youth theatre. I think they tend to do obviously projects at a time, and things change. And at the moment, they have a dance group as well, which is not just for disabled people, it's for everyone, but it is a group that is committed to welcoming those who come as they are, right? And in particularly, you know, making sure there are spaces already made that you don't have to go in and make yourself for young disabled people. Well, it has been lovely to talk to you, Chantelle. Thank you so, so much. As we have said the word space so many times in this interview, and we are constantly talking about holding space for young disabled people, making space, I think you and I should take a moment to recognize the space that exists, the place that we have, that we can be there, because, you know, we know how to hold space, don't we?
We do.
Should we take a moment to hold space?
I think we need to hold space.
I'll hold your finger, you're going to hold mine?
I'm going to hold your finger.
I didn't know this was happening.